The queen expected me to beg. When I laughed, even her guards panicked. The palace floated silently above the gas giant, a magnificent structure of shimmering metals and alien architecture that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its towers curved and twisted in impossible shapes, and lights floated along invisible paths, casting a soft glow across the vast terraces. Commander Alex Harris had never seen anything like it, not in all his years navigating the galaxy. He had faced hostile worlds, uncharted systems, and strange alien cultures, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. Today, he would meet the Queen herself, a ruler whose reputation was legendary across the stars. She was said to be brilliant, calculating, and merciless, and many who had entered her court had never returned with their pride intact. Alex stepped onto the landing platform, the hum of the palace's energy shields vibrating faintly under his boots. His uniform was simple, practical, and distinctly human, standing in stark contrast to the alien elegance that surrounded him. He had been summoned without explanation, and the summons had been delivered with the weight of authority that left no room for refusal. The transport had deposited him here silently, the doors sliding shut behind him with barely a sound. For a moment he paused, taking a deep breath. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal, a scent unlike anything he had encountered. He reminded himself that whatever awaited him, fear would not serve him. Humans were not known for yielding easily, and he intended to prove that today. As he walked into the palace, the walls seemed to stretch infinitely, adorned with shifting patterns that reflected colors beyond the visible spectrum. Courtiers and guards lined the corridors, their forms alien in every aspect, tall, slender, with eyes that glowed softly and skin that shimmered in hues he couldn't name. They watched him silently, their expressions unreadable, but he could feel their curiosity. It was a gaze that weighed him, that measured him, and he knew they expected something from him. They expected submission, hesitation, perhaps even fear. But Alex walked steadily, his head held high, his steps calm and deliberate. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing a human falter. The throne room opened before him, vast and circular, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. A soft light illuminated the center where a platform rose, and upon it sat the queen. She was unlike any being Alex had ever seen. Her presence was magnetic, commanding, and yet there was a subtle grace in her posture. Her eyes, large and unblinking, seemed to pierce directly into his thoughts. The court had fallen silent, and even the usual hum of energy within the palace seemed to pause. Alex's own heartbeat felt loud in the quiet, but he resisted the instinct to bow or defer. Instead, he allowed himself a calm smile, a small gesture that immediately caused a ripple of tension among the guards. They had not expected confidence, especially not laughter. The queen's voice was smooth, like liquid crystal, and it carried across the room without a hint of strain. "Commander Harris," she said, her tone neither warm nor cold, "you have come. I understand you are known among your species for your unpredictability." Alex inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her words without fear. "I do what I must," he replied simply, letting the confidence in his tone speak louder than any words could. The queen's gaze lingered, sharp and calculating, as if weighing every nuance of his behavior. The guards shifted slightly, their movements betraying unease. Humans were not often so composed, so willing to meet scrutiny without bending. "What do you see when you look upon my court, human?" the queen asked. Her question was more than curiosity, it was a test. Many would have faltered here, offering praise, flattery, or perhaps groveling in submission. Alex studied her briefly before responding. "I see intelligence," he said, "and I see power, but I also see questions, and questions can change the outcome of anything, even in the most controlled environment." His words hung in the air, quiet yet firm, and a few of the alien courtiers exchanged subtle glances. The queen's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with something akin to fascination. She had expected fear or hesitation, not this human resolve. She stood, her movements fluid and deliberate, and descended from the platform with a grace that made her seem almost weightless. "Your species is curious," she observed. "Curiosity is dangerous, it leads to mistakes." Alex watched her unflinching. "Or it leads to discovery," he countered. "Humans have survived not because we avoid mistakes, but because we learn from them. Every failure is an opportunity to grow stronger." There was a quiet power in his words, a confidence not born of arrogance, but of experience and understanding. Even the guards, imposing and trained for centuries, seemed momentarily unsettled. Humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability was unsettling for those who relied on control. The queen regarded him silently for a moment, her expression inscrutable. Then she spoke again. "You have been brought here because the galaxy underestimates your kind. They see weakness where there is something else. Tell me, Commander, why should I consider humans anything more than pawns?" Alex's lips curved into a slight smile, and he took a measured step forward. "Because pawns can become kings," he replied. "And because humans, when faced with impossible odds, do not bend. We think, we adapt, and we surprise. That is something no one can predict. That is something even the strongest cannot control." The queen tilted her head, intrigued but not entirely convinced. She gestured to a large holographic display that shimmered into view, showing a complex map of interstellar systems, trade routes, and political alliances. "Here is your test," she said. "All of this is in disorder, conflicts, disputes, inefficiencies. One wrong move and countless lives are at risk. You are to provide a solution if you can. I am curious whether your species can truly meet the expectations I have seen claimed." Alex approached the display, studying the intricate lines and nodes that represented centuries of planning and governance. He could see the chaos, the inefficiency, and yet also the opportunities that lay hidden within. To an alien mind, the solution might seem impossible, but to him, it was simply a problem that required observation, patience, and creativity. Hours passed as he worked, moving pieces in ways that no one present had anticipated. He suggested trade adjustments that increased efficiency, strategies for conflict resolution that required negotiation rather than force, and methods of cooperation that fostered understanding between disparate species. Each idea was met with silence, then murmured approval from some of the younger advisors. The queen watched, expression unchanging, yet the guards began to shift nervously. This human, he was not just surviving the test, he was excelling in ways they had never imagined. And then, at a moment when the solution seemed complete, Alex leaned back, a faint smile on his face, and laughed softly, not mockingly, but in amazement at the elegance of it all. The sound echoed through the chamber. Even the queen blinked, startled. Her guards, trained to anticipate every human response, stiffened, unprepared for such a reaction. Humans did not behave this way. Humans laughed at situations that others would fear. The queen's gaze held his for a long moment, her curiosity mingling with respect. "You are different," she said finally. "Not in strength, not in cunning, but in spirit. I have underestimated you, and perhaps I have underestimated your species as a whole." Alex nodded, his confidence unwavering. "Sometimes the greatest strength is simply to think, to observe, and to remain unshaken by expectation," he replied. The guards shifted again, this time less from tension and more from a dawning realization. Humans were a species to be taken seriously, not because of their weapons or power, but because of the minds they carried and the courage they wielded without fear. As the session ended, the queen stepped back onto her platform, her expression softened just slightly. "You have shown me something I did not expect, Commander Harris. That alone makes your presence here significant." Alex inclined his head. "I am honored to be here, and I am grateful for the opportunity to demonstrate what humans can do." The alien courtiers whispered among themselves, some openly impressed, some uncertain, and the queen allowed the murmurs to continue without interruption. The room, once tense and intimidating, now held a new energy, one of possibility, of potential, and of a species that refused to be underestimated. When Alex finally left the throne room, the palace corridors seemed different. He had walked in as an unknown human, expected to falter, expected to bow. He had emerged as something else entirely, a representative of humanity's courage, intellect, and unpredictable spirit. Even from a distance, the queen's gaze followed him, not with malice but with respect. For the first time in her long reign, she considered that humans were not merely another species to monitor or control. They were a force of nature in their own right, capable of surprising even the most calculated minds in the galaxy. Outside, the transport awaited him, ready to return him to his ship. As he stepped aboard, Alex took one last look at the palace, its towers glinting against the swirling colors of the gas giant below. A quiet smile crossed his face. Today, humans had not fought with weapons, had not demanded recognition, and had not bowed in fear. Yet they had won something far greater: respect. And as the engines hummed to life and the transport lifted away, Alex knew this encounter would change the way the galaxy viewed his people forever. The transport glided silently through the pale blue atmosphere of the gas giant, leaving the floating palace behind. Commander Alex Harris, he sat in the cabin, his mind still alive with the events of the throne room. Even hours later, he could hear the faint echo of his own laughter in his memory, a sound that had unnerved even the Queen's elite guards. It had been more than a test of knowledge or intellect. It had been a test of presence, of spirit. And he had passed, not with force, but with calm confidence. That simple fact filled him with a quiet satisfaction, yet he knew that the encounter was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's reputation had yet to be truly measured among the stars. His ship hummed beneath him as it adjusted its course toward the human exploration fleet in orbit around a nearby system. Reports from the Queen's palace had already begun to filter through, transmitted by subtle channels only accessible to those who had gained trust. Even without meaning to, Alex had set off a ripple of whispers across multiple civilizations. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were clever. And apparently humans could laugh in the face of beings who had mastered political strategy for centuries. These small waves of astonishment were spreading quickly, and Alex could feel the weight of it. Not in a way that made him nervous, but in a way that reminded him of the responsibility his species now carried. As the transport approached the fleet, Alex's thoughts turned to the fleet commander, Captain Myra Lawson. She was waiting on the observation deck, her stance rigid, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched into her features. Myra had always been pragmatic, a careful leader who valued preparation over improvisation, and now she was about to witness the result of humanity stepping into a wider galactic stage. Alex exited the transport, stepping onto the deck with his usual calm demeanor. The crew paused in their work, many glancing at him with quiet awe. News of his audience with the Queen had spread faster than the engines could carry him. "Commander," Myra said, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief, "you returned faster than I expected." "And I take it the reports we intercepted were accurate." Alex gave a short nod, his expression calm. "More than accurate. I wasn't just questioned or tested. I was observed, measured, and underestimated. Until I showed them what humans can do." Myra's eyes narrowed slightly, a thoughtful look passing across her face. "And the Queen, did she truly believe we were weak?" Alex smiled faintly. "She believed she could intimidate. She believed humans would hesitate. But we don't always act the way others expect. That is our advantage." The fleet, a collection of exploration and research vessels, had long been considered humanity's first significant presence beyond its home systems. Each ship carried humans who had ventured into the unknown, learning, observing, and reporting. None had encountered the sheer alien sophistication of the Queen's palace before. Alex understood that the knowledge he had gained was valuable not only for immediate strategy, but for long-term influence. Humanity had been underestimated, but that underestimation could be turned into opportunity, and Alex intended to do exactly that. He would show that human ingenuity was more than tactical. It was a force that could reshape perception itself. In the days that followed, Alex worked with the fleet's strategists to analyze the maps, trade routes, and political networks he had seen in the palace. He moved quickly, using his memory and experience to reconstruct the intricate systems the aliens relied upon. His suggestions were not just about efficiency, they were about perspective. He recommended approaches that no alien mind had considered, emphasizing adaptability, communication, and creative problem-solving. His methods were unusual, sometimes uncomfortable to those accustomed to rigid planning, but they were effective. Already, the fleet's officers began to see patterns and solutions that had eluded them for decades. One evening, Alex stood alone on the observation deck, staring at the swirling colors of the nearby gas giant. The clouds moved in bands of blues, greens, and purples, their patterns shifting endlessly, yet in a rhythm that seemed to mirror thought itself. He thought about the Queen, about her calm, calculating eyes, and about the guards who had faltered under the simple sound of his laughter. Humans had a unique ability, not just to survive, but to thrive in ways that others could not anticipate. It was not strength measured in weapons or brute force, but in curiosity, creativity, and courage. In that moment, he understood more clearly than ever that humanity's greatest advantage was its mind, and its willingness to use it without fear. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Myra's voice came over the comm link, calm but insistent. "Commander Harris, we've received a request from the neighboring systems. Several species want to understand your presence with the Queen. They are curious, cautious. They want proof of your claims about humanity." Alex took a deep breath, considering his response. "Curiosity is a good thing," he said finally. "It means they are willing to observe rather than attack. We will provide them with answers they can understand without conflict." That is how humans operate. We influence not through fear, but through reason, action, and example. In the following days, Alex and the fleet became ambassadors in a subtle but profound way. They hosted meetings in neutral space, demonstrating human problem-solving abilities on issues ranging from navigation hazards to interstellar trade inefficiencies. Each demonstration was careful, measured, and transparent. Aliens observed humans collaborating, laughing through minor mistakes, and adjusting their plans without panic. It was a display that was both entertaining and enlightening. For many species, it was the first time they had witnessed humans in action outside of conflict or competition. And for Alex, it was a confirmation of what he had always believed. Humans could be respected without ever raising a weapon. Word of Alex's success began to spread across communications networks faster than anticipated. Reports of his clever solutions and calm demeanor reached systems that had never interacted with humans before. Aliens began to reconsider their assumptions. Some were hesitant, questioning whether the humans' methods were reliable. Others were fascinated, eager to observe further. Alex encouraged curiosity, guided discussion, and remained patient. He knew that true respect was earned over time, not demanded. And in every interaction, he emphasized the uniquely human qualities that had so surprised the Queen: observation, collaboration, humor, and ingenuity. One day, a delegation from a previously indifferent species arrived aboard the flagship. Their emissary, tall and angular with eyes that reflected light like polished gems, greeted Alex formally. "Commander Harris," the emissary began, "we have observed your actions with interest. Your species behaves unlike any we expected. We wish to understand how humans achieve such results." Alex smiled politely. "It's simple," he replied. "We listen, we observe, and we adapt. We value ideas over hierarchy, and we believe that collaboration is stronger than coercion. We approach challenges as puzzles, not battles." The emissary regarded him thoughtfully, clearly impressed. "Your methods are unorthodox yet effective. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated you." As weeks passed, Alex continued to build bridges. He met with scholars, strategists, and leaders from multiple systems, sharing human techniques for diplomacy, resource management, and creative problem-solving. Each meeting reinforced a simple truth: humans were capable of changing perspectives without resorting to force. Even the most skeptical observers began to adjust their assumptions. Stories circulated of a human who laughed in the face of intimidation, and yet solved problems others had deemed impossible. These stories became a quiet legend, a whisper among star systems that humans were not merely a species to watch, but one to respect. Through it all, Alex remained grounded. He did not boast or demand recognition. He focused on the work, on demonstrating the value of humanity's approach. Yet in private moments, he reflected on the subtle power humans wielded. Not because of technology or numbers, but because of the willingness to think freely, to act courageously, and to meet expectation with calm creativity. In these reflections, he saw a future in which humanity could influence the galaxy not through domination, but through example, a future in which humans were seen as unpredictable, clever, and resilient in ways that could reshape interstellar relationships. One quiet evening, as Alex stood once more on the observation deck, Myra joined him, leaning slightly against the railing. "You've done something remarkable," she said quietly. "You've changed minds without firing a single weapon." Alex nodded, his gaze fixed on the swirling atmosphere below. "That's the human way," he replied. "We survive not because we overpower, but because we think, because we laugh when others expect fear, and because we adapt when others cannot." Myra smiled faintly, understanding the depth of his words. Humanity's reputation was growing, not through intimidation, but through the quiet demonstration of intelligence, courage, and spirit. It was a powerful legacy, one that no species had truly anticipated. As the fleet continued its missions, Alex received another message from the Queen. Her words were brief but laden with meaning. "You have proven more than I expected. I am curious what humans will do next." Alex allowed himself a small smile. Curiosity was a door, and humanity was ready to walk through it. Every mission, every interaction, every demonstration reinforced the same truth. Humans were not defined by what others thought of them, but by what they were willing to show the universe. And as he prepared for the next set of challenges, Alex felt a quiet confidence. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. That underestimation was ending. In those weeks, the fleet became a moving example of human ingenuity. Other species began to send observers, sometimes skeptics, sometimes eager learners, to witness humanity in action. Each encounter reinforced the same lesson. Humans were clever, adaptable, and unafraid to face challenges others considered insurmountable. Alex guided each meeting with calm assurance, ensuring that every action highlighted human strengths without arrogance. It was a careful balance, and he handled it with the precision of someone who understood both responsibility and opportunity. By the time the fleet moved to the next system, stories of Commander Harris's actions with the Queen and his subsequent diplomacy had spread across dozens of civilizations. Aliens spoke quietly of the human who could laugh in the face of fear and still solve problems others had abandoned. Respect was forming, slowly but steadily, and with it, a new understanding. Humanity was a species to be valued not for weapons or might, but for mind and spirit. And in this understanding, Alex saw the seeds of something far greater than any single mission. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. It was beginning to shine. The human fleet glided through the empty space between stars, the bright streaks of distant suns painting soft reflections on the hulls of the ships. Commander Alex Harris, he stood on the observation deck of the flagship, his hands resting lightly on the railing, his eyes fixed on the swirling colors of a nearby nebula. The beauty of the universe always fascinated him, but his mind was not at rest. Reports had arrived from multiple systems, some requesting guidance, others observing cautiously. Every message carried the same undertone: curiosity, respect, and in a few cases, disbelief. Humans had done something unexpected, and now the galaxy was watching to see what they would do next. Alex understood this more clearly than anyone. Humanity's next moves would not just affect their reputation. They could influence alliances and the balance of power in subtle, meaningful ways. He turned to the tactical screen, studying a complex map of interstellar trade networks. Several neighboring systems were experiencing conflicts of resource distribution, nothing violent, but enough to create tension and inefficiency. Aliens had attempted to solve these problems through negotiation and bureaucratic measures, yet the issues persisted. Alex could see the patterns immediately, connections invisible to others because they approached the problem from rigid angles. Humans thought differently. They did not rely solely on hierarchy or protocol. They adapted, observed, and improvised. These traits, honed over millennia, allowed them to approach challenges in ways no other species had considered. "Commander!" came a voice from behind him. Captain Myra Lawson, she stepped onto the deck, her expression thoughtful. The neighboring systems are requesting a demonstration of human solutions. They want to see not just words, but actions. They want to know why your species is suddenly seen as different. Alex nodded. "We'll give them more than words," he replied. "We'll show them the human way, observation, collaboration, and creative thinking. That is our strength." Myra studied him silently for a moment. "And you're confident they'll understand?" she asked. Alex allowed a faint smile. "They may not understand at first. But humans are not afraid to take the first step. That alone changes perception." The fleet altered course toward the system requesting guidance. The vessels moved with quiet precision, their crews focused on the tasks ahead. Every officer and specialist aboard knew the stakes were high. This was not just a routine mission. It was an opportunity to demonstrate humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. Alex gathered his team in the strategy room, a holographic display shimmering before them. He began to outline the challenge: resource imbalances, inefficient distribution channels, and potential misunderstandings between allied planets. He spoke calmly, explaining the situation in simple, clear terms. Each suggestion he made was logical, adaptable, and practical. Yet there was something more than logic in his approach. There was creativity, the ability to see solutions others had never considered. Hours passed as Alex and the fleet officers collaborated, moving pieces on the holographic map, discussing scenarios and refining strategies. They simulated trade adjustments, proposed cooperative agreements, and introduced new methods for resource sharing. Unlike alien bureaucracies, which often relied on rigid systems, the human team emphasized flexibility and observation. They accounted for the unexpected, preparing for contingencies that others would have ignored. By the time the session ended, the team had outlined a complete plan that balanced efficiency, fairness, and adaptability. Alex leaned back, a quiet sense of satisfaction filling him. They had not just solved the problem, they had reshaped it, turning a complex tangle into a manageable, elegant system. When the fleet arrived in the system, Alex requested a meeting with the planetary leaders. The council chamber, a massive structure floating above the largest planet, was filled with beings of every imaginable form, tall and thin, short and round, some with translucent skin that shimmered in the ambient light. They had all heard the stories of humans, of a species that laughed in the face of expectation and solved problems with creativity rather than force. Now they would see it for themselves. Alex stepped forward confidently, introducing the plan, explaining each step, and demonstrating the reasoning behind every suggestion. He did not speak down to them or attempt to impress with technology. He relied solely on clarity, observation, and logical presentation. The council listened intently, some skeptical, others curious, all aware that this was unusual. They had expected arrogance, force, or at least insistence. Instead, they saw calm and clarity. As the meeting continued, questions arose. Several council members challenged aspects of the plan, pointing out potential flaws or consequences they feared. Alex welcomed the questions, answering each one calmly and thoroughly. When they presented obstacles he had not considered, he adapted in real time, offering new solutions and adjustments without hesitation. There was no tension in his demeanor, no fear in his voice. For the first time, many of the council members realized that humans did not respond to pressure the way other species did. They observed, they thought, and they acted. The difference was subtle but profound. By the end of the session, the council had agreed to implement the plan on a trial basis, and murmurs of respect rippled through the chamber. Humans were no longer a curiosity, they were a model for creative problem-solving. After the meeting, Alex walked through the observation galleries of the council chambers, accompanied by Myra. They watched the planetary systems below, the lights of cities twinkling like stars, the intricate networks of trade and travel visible even from this height. "They seem impressed," Myra said quietly. Alex nodded. "Not impressed by our strength, but by our approach. That is far more important. Respect built on fear fades quickly. Respect built on understanding lasts." Myra smiled faintly. "And the galaxy is beginning to understand humans in that way." Alex allowed a small laugh, recalling the moment in the Queen's palace when his own laughter had caused unease. "It begins with one mind at a time," he said. "Curiosity, observation, and creativity. Humans have a unique combination of traits that others cannot easily replicate. That is what makes us different." In the following days, the human fleet worked closely with the council, guiding the implementation of the new resource system. They trained local officials, coordinated schedules, and demonstrated adaptability in real time. Observers from neighboring systems arrived, some cautiously, others eagerly. Each demonstration reinforced the same lesson. Humans were clever, adaptable, and unafraid to confront complex problems without relying on hierarchy or intimidation. Stories spread quickly. This was not about weapons, territory, or conquest. It was about thought, collaboration, and ingenuity. The observers took notes, asked questions, and learned from humans' ability to analyze and act in ways that others had never considered. One evening, Alex returned to the flagship observation deck, watching the system below transform under the new approach. Cities that had struggled with inefficiency now operated smoothly. Trade networks adjusted naturally, and tensions between planets decreased. Humans had introduced a model that emphasized understanding and cooperation, turning potential conflict into collaboration. He thought of the Queen, her calculated gaze, and the guards who had been unsettled by his laughter. He understood now that the lesson he had imparted in that palace was spreading, not through confrontation, but through demonstration. Humans did not rely on intimidation. They relied on the clarity of thought and the courage to act on it. Myra joined him once more, standing quietly beside him. "The reports say the neighboring systems are astonished," she said softly. "Some are even requesting further guidance. Humans are becoming influential." Alex nodded, his gaze fixed on the lights below. "Influence is not the goal. Understanding is. If they respect and understand us, that influence follows naturally. That is the human way. We show our value not by force, but by example, by problem-solving, by courage and ingenuity." Myra looked at him thoughtfully, clearly considering the implications. Humanity was proving that diplomacy and creativity could be far more powerful than weapons, and that lesson was beginning to resonate across the galaxy. The days that followed were filled with meetings, demonstrations, and quiet guidance. Humans taught observation, flexibility, and creative approaches to problems, emphasizing adaptability over rigidity. They helped neighboring systems see inefficiencies, resolved misunderstandings, and introduced methods that fostered collaboration rather than competition. Throughout it all, Alex remained calm and patient, allowing his team to shine, encouraging curiosity, and demonstrating the uniquely human blend of humor, intelligence, and courage. Observers from other civilizations were consistently surprised by the results, realizing that humans approach challenges differently, yet effectively. In every interaction, humanity's reputation grew stronger, not through domination, but through understanding. One afternoon, a message arrived from the Queen herself. Alex activated the hologram and her calm, calculating eyes appeared. "Commander Harris," she said, her voice smooth and deliberate, "I have been following your progress. Your actions in the neighboring systems are remarkable. Your species behaves in ways I did not anticipate. I am curious how far this approach can go." Alex allowed a small smile. "The approach does not have a limit," he replied. "Humans learn, adapt, and apply their creativity to every situation. That is what makes us effective, and we do not rely on fear or force to achieve our goals." The Queen regarded him silently, her expression inscrutable, yet her tone carried a hint of respect. "Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated humans for too long," she said finally. As the fleet continued its missions, the human influence began to expand quietly but steadily. Systems once hesitant to interact now sought guidance. Species that had ignored humans now observed them with interest. The stories of Commander Harris, of a human who laughed in the face of expectation and solved problems no one else could, became part of interstellar conversation. Respect was forming, and with it, a new understanding. Humans were clever, adaptable, and fearless in ways others could not easily predict. Alex watched this progress with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the seeds of lasting influence had been planted. It was not power that defined humanity, it was mind, spirit, and courage. That truth was beginning to resonate across the stars. Even in quiet moments, Alex reflected on the lessons learned. Humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, yet their combination of observation, creativity, and adaptability gave them an edge others could not anticipate. They approached challenges with courage and clarity, unafraid to question assumptions and find novel solutions. That was why humans had laughed in the palace and unsettled the Queen's guards. That was why they now commanded respect across multiple systems without a single confrontation. And that was why the galaxy would begin to see humans as a species to reckon with, not through fear, but through ingenuity, intellect, and heart. By the time the fleet departed the system, the neighboring civilizations were implementing the human-inspired methods themselves. Efficiency had improved, cooperation had increased, and curiosity about humanity continued to grow. Alex stood on the observation deck once more, watching the stars pass by, the same calm smile playing across his face. Humans had begun to influence the galaxy in a way no one had expected, not with weapons, not with domination, but with intelligence, creativity, and the courage to act. The ripple of their presence had begun, and there was no turning back. Humanity's story in the stars was only just beginning, and Commander Harris knew that the next chapter would be even more remarkable. The human fleet drifted through uncharted space, the stars stretching endlessly in every direction. Commander Alex Harris, he stood on the observation deck of the flagship, his gaze fixed on a distant cluster of systems that glowed faintly like scattered jewels. For weeks, the fleet had assisted neighboring civilizations, solving problems, improving communication, and fostering cooperation. Humanity's reputation had grown quietly but steadily. Yet Alex knew that the galaxy's attention was only deepening, and with attention came expectation. Other species watched closely, wondering whether humans could handle challenges more complex than resource conflicts or logistical puzzles. Soon, Alex would face one of those challenges, a situation that would test not just strategy and intelligence, but the very essence of human adaptability. A message arrived from the Queen's palace, the hologram flickering to life with her composed, calculating presence. "Commander Harris," she said, her voice clear and smooth, "there is a situation developing in the Orinthia cluster. Several systems are struggling with a complex energy imbalance. It threatens not only local planets but interstellar stability. I am curious how your species will respond." Alex studied the map she projected, lines of energy flow twisting and shifting, systems interconnecting in ways both intricate and delicate. "We will do what humans do best," he replied with quiet confidence. "We will observe, analyze, and adapt, and we will work together with those affected to find a solution." The Queen inclined her head slightly, a hint of intrigue in her expression. "I will watch with interest," she said before the message ended. Even across the distance of light years, Alex felt the weight of her attention. But he did not falter. Humans were not accustomed to fear of expectation. They thrived on challenges. The fleet approached the Orinthia cluster carefully, scanning the systems and analyzing the energy fluctuations. Myra Lawson, she, and other fleet officers gathered in the strategy room, their eyes reflecting concern. "Commander, these fluctuations are unlike anything we've seen," Myra said. "They are subtle but persistent, and they could cause serious disruption if not corrected." Alex nodded. "Exactly, which is why we need to approach this as a puzzle, not a crisis." Humans excel at puzzles. He activated the holographic map, highlighting the areas where energy flows were most unstable. "Notice the patterns," he continued. "It's not random, there's a rhythm here. If we can identify the source and understand the interactions, we can stabilize the entire cluster without creating conflict." The fleet began coordinating with the local systems, sending teams to gather data, observe planetary reactions, and test minor adjustments. Unlike alien administrators who might attempt to force a single solution from above, Alex encouraged collaboration. Human teams worked with scientists, engineers, and leaders from the affected systems, teaching observation techniques, sharing analytic methods, and inviting input at every step. It was slow work, requiring patience and attention, but the humans' approach had an unexpected effect. The alien systems began to trust them. They saw that humans were not trying to control, dominate, or manipulate. Instead, humans guided, explained, and adapted. This built a network of cooperation that no previous attempt had achieved. By the time initial data was gathered, the fleet had a clearer picture of the problem than anyone had thought possible. The source of the energy imbalance was finally identified, a series of unstable energy conduits that connected multiple planets in a delicate balance. Years of neglect combined with inconsistent maintenance had caused the conduits to fluctuate, creating minor but escalating disturbances across the cluster. Most species had avoided touching the conduits, fearing disruption. Alex, however, saw opportunity. Where others saw risk, humans saw a chance to apply logic, creativity, and ingenuity. He gathered his team, outlining a plan that relied on observation, testing, and careful adjustment. Each step was deliberate but flexible. "We cannot force the conduits," he explained. "We must understand their rhythm and work with it. Humans have a knack for seeing patterns where others see chaos." Teams were deployed to each affected system, working alongside local engineers. Alex personally oversaw coordination, using the fleet's technology to monitor energy flows in real time. Small adjustments were made, tested, and refined. When unexpected responses occurred, humans adapted immediately, collaborating with local teams to modify the approach. For the first time, several systems saw a method of problem-solving unlike anything they had known. There were no commands from above, no hierarchy demanding obedience. Instead, humans observed, suggested, experimented, and communicated. Their laughter occasionally echoed in the control centers, soft, light, and unexpected, reminding everyone present that stress could be met with calm creativity. Even skeptical observers began to smile, learning that tension did not always require fear. Days passed as the stabilization project continued. Alex remained at the center of operations, analyzing data, refining approaches, and guiding human and alien teams alike. Slowly, the energy conduits began to stabilize. Minor imbalances adjusted themselves in response to careful interventions, and patterns emerged that no one had predicted. The galaxy's attention was focused on the results, and every correction reinforced the human reputation for ingenuity and adaptability. Observers from distant systems sent comms to watch the process, recording methods and outcomes. Humans were proving something fundamental. The galaxy could be influenced, even improved, not through force or domination, but through clever observation, collaboration, and courage to act without fear. One evening, Alex walked onto the observation deck of the flagship, watching the glow of multiple planets below as adjustments continued. Myra joined him quietly, standing beside him in silence. "You've done something remarkable here," she said softly. "The systems are stabilizing and the aliens are learning from us." Alex nodded. "Not learning obedience, but learning perspective," he replied. "Humans approach problems differently. We don't rely on fear, authority, or brute strength. We rely on observation, creativity, and collaboration, and that makes a difference." Myra considered this, her gaze shifting across the planets below. "Do you think the Queen is watching?" she asked. Alex allowed a faint smile. "I am certain of it. She has a keen mind. And she understands what humans can accomplish when given a challenge." As the energy stabilization reached completion, the affected systems began to see tangible results. Resource allocation improved, trade routes became more efficient, and planetary communication networks synchronized naturally. Local leaders who had once doubted human methods openly praised the fleet's approach. Systems that had been tense and uncertain now operated with new confidence, guided not by humans alone, but by the collaborative techniques humans had introduced. Alex allowed a quiet moment of satisfaction. Humanity had accomplished something extraordinary without conflict. They had solved a complex interstellar challenge through intelligence, creativity, and cooperation alone. And in doing so, they had set an example that would be remembered for generations. A message arrived from the Queen once more, her hologram shimmering in the flagship's command room. "Commander Harris," she said, her tone both calm and measured, "I have observed your actions in the Orinthia cluster. Your species demonstrates capabilities I had not anticipated. You influence without command, solve problems without coercion, and guide others without pressure. This is remarkable." Alex inclined his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Humans are most effective when we observe, adapt, and work together. That approach has allowed us to stabilize the cluster and help the systems themselves grow stronger." The Queen studied him for a long moment. "Perhaps I have underestimated humans not in ability, but in spirit. Your actions prove a strength that is subtle yet far-reaching." Alex allowed a quiet, respectful smile. "Sometimes the quietest strength has the greatest impact." Even after the Queen's message ended, Alex reflected on the events. Humans had faced a challenge far beyond what most species could manage without imposing control. They had observed, learned, adapted, and led without force, and in doing so had inspired confidence and respect across multiple civilizations. This was the essence of human ingenuity, the ability to turn complexity into clarity, confusion into cooperation, and challenge into opportunity. The laughter, the calm confidence, the clear thinking, and the willingness to act without fear had become the true markers of humanity. The galaxy was watching, and humans were proving themselves in ways no one could ignore. The stabilization of the Orinthia cluster became a quiet legend. Reports spread across systems, detailing how humans had collaborated with aliens, solved complex interstellar challenges, and improved efficiency without coercion. Observers from other civilizations arrived to learn, not to monitor or control. Stories of Commander Harris laughing calmly in the face of expectations circulated widely. Humans were no longer unknown or underestimated. They were respected, not for strength or weaponry, but for intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. And that respect, earned through action and example, began to shape a new understanding of what humanity could achieve in the galaxy. Alex walked again to the observation deck, Myra following closely. The stars stretched endlessly, the nebulae glowed softly, and distant planets shimmered like gems. "This is just the beginning," Alex said quietly. "We've shown the galaxy what humans can do, but there is so much more to learn, so much more to explore. Every system, every species, every challenge is an opportunity for us to demonstrate who we are." Myra nodded, a faint smile crossing her face. "And the galaxy will be watching." Alex allowed a soft, confident laugh, recalling the moment in the Queen's palace when his own laughter had caused unease. "Let them watch," he said. "They will see humans are more than they ever expected. And we will continue to surprise them, not with force, but with thought, courage, and creativity." As the fleet prepared to move to the next cluster, Alex reviewed the systems they had assisted, noting the improvements and progress. Humans had become a model for innovation, collaboration, and problem-solving. The lessons learned here would spread naturally, as civilizations shared observations and adopted methods. The Queen's attention remained a quiet presence in the back of his mind, a reminder that their actions were being observed by some of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. Yet Alex felt no pressure, only clarity. Humanity had proven itself capable of extraordinary things, and the ripple of influence would continue to grow. By the time the fleet departed, the Orinthia cluster had been transformed. Problems that had seemed insurmountable now operated with new efficiency. Trust between systems had improved, and humans had earned recognition not through fear, but through intelligence and integrity. Alex stood on the observation deck once more, watching the stars pass, knowing that this was not an end, but a step toward greater influence. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. Their courage, ingenuity, and adaptability had spoken for them. And the story of what humans could accomplish was only beginning to spread, quietly but powerfully, across the stars. The stars stretched endlessly before Commander Alex Harris, as the human fleet moved through interstellar space. The events of the Orinthia cluster had already spread across multiple systems, and humanity's reputation had grown quietly but powerfully. Ships from other civilizations observed from a distance, curious about the humans who solved impossible problems without force, who laughed calmly in the face of expectation, and who inspired cooperation instead of fear. Alex walked across the observation deck, his mind alive with possibilities. He knew the galaxy was changing. The ripple of humanity's influence was spreading faster than he had imagined, and it would continue to grow. What humans had done so far was only the beginning. Now came the moment to show the full extent of their potential. A message arrived from the Queen's palace, her hologram shimmering in the command room, her eyes, calm and precise as ever, fixed on him. "Commander Harris," she said, her voice smooth and clear, "your actions in multiple clusters have caught my attention. The galaxy is beginning to recognize the unique capabilities of your species. I wish to see how far humans can extend their influence without relying on conflict or domination." Alex inclined his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, humans operate best when we observe, adapt, and collaborate. We influence through action, not force. The more complex the challenge, the more we learn and the more we can contribute." The Queen studied him for a long moment, as though weighing his words carefully. "Very well," she said finally. "The next challenge will be the ultimate test. The systems of the Lysara constellation are interconnected and delicate. One misstep could destabilize the cluster. I am curious if your species can succeed where others have failed." The fleet altered course toward the Lysara constellation, a region of densely packed star systems, each with intricate trade networks and interdependent energy grids. These systems had long been considered too complicated for outside interference. Attempts by alien councils to stabilize minor issues had failed, and many had given up entirely. Alex studied the maps, analyzing patterns of trade, resource allocation, and energy distribution. It was a tangle of interdependent systems, yet in the patterns he saw clarity. The challenge was immense, but humans thrived in complexity. They could spot relationships and connections that others overlooked. They could anticipate unintended consequences and adapt quickly. This was the advantage that the galaxy had only begun to notice. Upon entering the Lysara constellation, Alex organized the fleet and the assembled teams from the local systems. Myra Lawson, she, and the other officers were briefed thoroughly. "Commander, this cluster is more complicated than anything we've dealt with," Myra said. "It's not just a single system. One adjustment can ripple across multiple worlds. Mistakes could be catastrophic." Alex smiled calmly. "Exactly, which is why we won't act hastily. We'll observe, learn, and coordinate with the inhabitants. Collaboration will solve this better than imposition ever could." He activated the holographic display, showing every system and connection in the cluster. "This is a puzzle, and puzzles are what humans do best." For days, the fleet and local representatives worked together, observing energy flows, trade activity, and planetary communication systems. Humans introduced a methodical approach: small adjustments, careful monitoring, and adaptive collaboration. Every minor change was discussed openly, allowing local leaders to understand the reasoning behind each action. Unlike alien bureaucracies which often imposed solutions, humans encouraged participation and learning. Slowly, the systems began to stabilize. Patterns emerged. The cluster responded not to command, but to careful guidance. Observation, experimentation, and collaboration replaced chaos with clarity. Aliens who had once doubted humans were astonished at the effectiveness of their methods. One evening, as the fleet paused to analyze data, Alex stood on the observation deck, looking out at the dense cluster of stars. Myra joined him quietly. "It's remarkable," she said softly. "The systems are responding faster than I expected." "Humans really are different," Alex nodded. "Different in the right ways. We adapt, we communicate, we learn, and we act without fear. Other species may see limitations where we see opportunity. That is what allows humans to achieve what others cannot." Myra smiled faintly, looking at the twinkling stars and planets below. "And the galaxy is watching," she said. Alex allowed a faint chuckle. "Let them watch. They will see humans not as threats, but as problem solvers, collaborators, and thinkers. That is how we make a lasting impact." As the stabilization project progressed, unexpected challenges arose. Minor fluctuations in energy grids threatened to destabilize entire trade networks, and new conflicts over resource allocation emerged. Alex did not panic. Instead, he treated each problem as another layer of the puzzle. Human teams worked tirelessly, observing the systems, analyzing data, and implementing adjustments with precision. Local representatives were guided to understand the approach, ensuring that improvements were sustainable. Step by step, complexity was transformed into clarity. Each success reinforced trust, not just in the humans, but among the alien civilizations themselves. They began to see the value of thinking differently, of approaching problems collaboratively rather than hierarchically. One day, Alex received a communication from the Queen herself. Her holographic image shimmered in the command room. "Commander Harris," she said, her tone composed, "I have observed your progress. The Lysara constellation was considered a failure before your intervention. Yet your species has not only stabilized it, but improved cooperation between its systems. This is impressive." Alex inclined his head respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty. The success is shared with the local teams and the fleet." Humans provide guidance, observation, and creativity, but lasting change requires collaboration. That is why these improvements will endure. The Queen regarded him silently, then allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Perhaps the galaxy underestimated humans in ways more fundamental than I imagined," she said. "Your actions reveal strength in thought and spirit that surpasses simple calculation." By the end of the week, the Lysara constellation was fully stabilized. Trade networks operated efficiently, energy flows balanced naturally, and communication systems synchronized across systems that had once struggled for centuries. Observers from nearby civilizations documented the methods used by humans, eager to implement similar approaches elsewhere. News of the fleet's accomplishments spread quickly, reaching systems far beyond the cluster. The reputation of humanity was no longer confined to stories of bravery or isolated achievements. It had become a living example of ingenuity, collaboration, and adaptability. Aliens began to approach humans not as unknowns or curiosities, but as teachers, partners, and leaders in creative problem-solving. Alex stood on the observation deck once more, watching the stars and planets of the stabilized cluster below. Myra joined him, her expression reflecting awe and admiration. "Commander, the systems are running smoothly. Everyone is learning from us. Humans are making a difference without conflict, without force, without even needing to impose authority." Alex smiled. "That is the human way. We do not dominate, we demonstrate, we inspire. Influence comes naturally when people see the results of observation, creativity, and courage. That is how humanity grows, not through fear, but through understanding." Myra nodded, her gaze following the flickering lights of the planets below. "And the galaxy will never forget it." Even as the fleet prepared to depart, Alex reflected on the impact of their actions. Humans had entered systems considered too complex to manage, and yet they had succeeded. They had guided civilizations to cooperation, stabilized energy networks, and facilitated trade without ever raising a weapon. Their influence was subtle but profound, and their reputation had transformed from curiosity to respect. Aliens who had once underestimated humans now observed them as capable, clever, and unafraid to act. And through it all, Alex knew that the true strength of humanity lay not in power, but in thought, ingenuity, and the willingness to face challenges without fear. A final message arrived from the Queen, her holographic form shimmering in the flagship's command room. "Commander Harris," she said, her voice calm and precise, "I have watched your species grow in influence and capability over multiple clusters. Your methods are unlike any I have seen. You demonstrate that strength lies not only in force, but in intelligence, collaboration, and courage. This is a lesson the galaxy must learn." Alex inclined his head, respect evident in his posture. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Humans will continue to observe, learn, and act. That is how we thrive and how we inspire. Strength is not measured by dominance, but by understanding, adaptability, and the ability to solve problems together." The Queen regarded him silently for a long moment before fading from the hologram, leaving Alex with a quiet satisfaction. The fleet departed the Lysara constellation, leaving systems functioning more efficiently than they had in centuries. Observers from multiple civilizations waved farewell, and communications continued to arrive, requesting further guidance and advice. Humanity's influence was now a growing network, one that relied on intellect, collaboration, and ingenuity rather than coercion or conflict. Alex stood on the observation deck, watching the stars pass by, feeling the weight and the promise of what humanity had accomplished. They had proven themselves in ways the galaxy could not ignore. Respect had been earned, and it was grounded in action, creativity, and courage. As the fleet moved toward new systems, Alex reflected on the journey. From the Queen's Palace to the Orinthia cluster, and now the Lysara constellation, humanity had consistently demonstrated a unique approach to challenges. Observation, creativity, adaptability, and courage had been the tools that allowed them to succeed where others had failed. Laughter in the face of expectation, calm confidence in complex situations, and collaboration without coercion had become the hallmarks of human interaction. These traits had inspired respect, influenced civilizations, and transformed perceptions across the galaxy. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, yet Alex knew humanity's journey was only beginning. Each system offered new opportunities, new challenges, and new lessons. Humans would continue to observe, to adapt, and to guide, demonstrating that intelligence, creativity, and courage could achieve what force never could. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, and now it was beginning to understand. The ripple of humanity's influence would continue to spread, growing quietly but powerfully, across stars and civilizations alike. Alex turned to Myra, who stood beside him, watching the passing constellations. "The galaxy is changing," he said quietly. "And humanity is part of that change, not by force but by thought, action, and courage." Myra nodded, her expression reflecting both awe and determination. "And they will remember this," she replied. Alex allowed a quiet smile. "Yes, they will remember what humans can do. They will remember how we act when others expect hesitation. They will remember the laughter, the clarity, the courage. And that will shape the future." Together, they watched the stars, knowing that humanity's story in the galaxy was just beginning, and that their influence, born of intelligence and heart, would resonate for generations to come.